All right, now that we have a solid understanding of what HIV is, let's dive into a super important question. How is HIV transmitted? In other words, how does the virus spread from one person to another? There are a few ways that HIV can be transmitted, and knowing these is key to both protecting yourself and understanding how the virus works. First up, let's talk about the most common way HIV is spread, through sexual contact. HIV can be transmitted during sex, specifically through unprotected vaginal, anal, and though less commonly oral sex. Now, when I say unprotected, I'm talking about sex without using condoms or other protective methods. The virus is present in bodily fluids like semen, vaginal fluids, and rectal fluids, so during sex, it can enter the body through mucous membranes, which are found in the vagina, rectum, and, yes, even the mouth during oral sex. This is why using condoms is one of the most effective ways to prevent the transmission of HIV. They create a barrier that keeps those fluids from coming into contact with the other person's mucous membranes. But here's something really important to know. Not all sex carries the same level of risk. Anal sex, for instance, has a higher risk of transmitting HIV compared to vaginal sex because the lining of the rectum is thinner and more likely to tear, which can give the virus a direct route into the bloodstream. But hey, here's some good news. Using condoms consistently and correctly can reduce the risk of HIV transmission during sex by about 85%. Plus, there's something called PrEP. That's short for pre-exposure prophylaxis, a daily pill that people can take if they're at high risk of getting HIV. When taken consistently, it can reduce the risk of transmission by up to 99% during sex. Amazing, right? Now, the next major way HIV is transmitted is through blood-to-blood contact. This usually happens when people share needles, syringes, or other drug injection equipment. Anytime you're sharing something that comes into contact with blood, there's a risk of spreading HIV because the virus can be present in the blood of someone who's infected. It's not just needles, either. Tattoo equipment, piercings, or even unsterilized medical tools can pose a risk if they're contaminated with HIV-positive blood. That's why, if you're injecting drugs, it's really important to never share needles or equipment. There are harm reduction programs, like needle exchange programs, that provide clean needles to help reduce the spread of HIV among people who use drugs. It's all about minimizing the risk. Another way HIV can be transmitted is from an HIV-positive mother to her child during pregnancy, childbirth, or even through breastfeeding. This is called mother-to-child transmission, MTCT. Without any treatment, there's a significant chance that HIV could be passed to the baby, but here's where modern medicine really shines. With proper treatment, specifically antiretroviral therapy, an HIV-positive mother can reduce the risk of transmitting the virus to her baby to less than 1%. That's right, less than 1%. This shows just how powerful HIV treatment can be when it's done right. Now, there are other ways HIV can be transmitted, but they're much rarer today thanks to modern medical screening. For example, blood transfusions or organ transplants from an HIV-positive donor could transmit the virus. But nowadays, blood donations and organs are carefully screened for HIV. So this is a rare event in countries with advanced healthcare systems. All right, now that we know the how, let's talk about some common misconceptions around HIV transmission. These myths are everywhere, so let's clear them up. HIV is not spread by casual contact. That means you can't get HIV from hugging someone, shaking hands, sharing food, or even using the same toilet. Why? because HIV cannot survive long outside the human body. The virus dies pretty quickly when it's exposed to air, so those everyday activities like giving someone a hug, sharing a drink, or even sneezing are totally safe. So if you're worried about contracting HIV from touching or casual contact, rest easy. That's not how it works. This virus needs specific conditions to be transmitted, and casual contact isn't one of them. Now, let's talk about risk factors. Some behaviors put you at higher risk of HIV transmission, and it's really important to know what those are so you can make informed choices. One of the biggest risk factors is having multiple sexual partners without using protection, like condoms. The more partners you have, the higher your risk, especially if you're unsure of their HIV status. Another high-risk behavior is intravenous drug use, especially if you're sharing needles or equipment. Like we mentioned earlier, sharing needles allows HIV to be transmitted directly through blood contact, and that's a high-risk situation. So here's the bottom line. Understanding these risk factors is key to preventing the spread of HIV. Whether it's using condoms, not sharing needles, or getting tested regularly, being proactive about prevention can make a huge difference. And remember, knowledge is power. Knowing how HIV is transmitted helps break down the stigma, lets us support those living with HIV, and most importantly, helps prevent new cases. Up next, we'll take a look at how HIV affects the immune system and why it's so important to get tested and treated. Stick around.